It was a tough, challenging journey. It's not your distinction student, which most doctors are supposed to be. You'll find cases of people uh, ramming into house and floors, having their lungs pierced by the horn of a Burma. There was some incursion by some pirates from Philippines. As we all know, in any war or in any space, the hospitals are the most safeguarded place.
Could you hear the shootings from inside the clinic?
We were 1 kilometer away from actual ground zero. They were all killed in the end, and I was called to go and actually open those bags and body bags and see those maggot-invested bodies of those pirates that were killed. I got a letter saying I'm transferred to Putrajaya dated 1st of April. That's when I took Qualitas instead.
Join Disruptive Doctors.
I'm Dr. Selina, your host and co-founder of Disruptive Doctors. At Disruptive Doctors, we're building a platform to help doctors like you impact healthcare differently. In Postcall, we dive into the untold stories of doctors who are breaking the mold, trailblazers who are redefining what it means to be a doctor. This is Postcall Beyond the White Coat.
Today's episode is all about the business of medicine with Dr. Ramon Varughese. We'll dive into Dr. Ramon's fascinating journey, his decision-making process, his thoughts on the future of medicine beyond the clinic. Dr. Ramon is currently the Chief Medical Officer of Qualitas Health Malaysia and also serves as the country head of Qualitas Health Bangladesh. So stay tuned for a conversation that explores what it really means to blend business with medicine. This is Postcall Beyond the White Coat. Welcome, Dr. Ramon.
Hi, good afternoon, Selina. Thank you for having me again. Always a pleasure to be on the Disruptive Doctors platform.
Thanks. Maybe you can share a short introduction about yourself because you've got quite a fancy resume. Perhaps the audience can hear from yourself.
Right. Thank you, Selina, again. Yes. Well, I'm Ramon Varughese. I don't like to say that I'm a doctor by profession, but I like to say that I am who I am, and I am a doctor, but I'm also a husband, I'm a son, and I'm also a friend of the community. I did my medicine and graduated about 17 years ago in Manipal. My career has transversed along from Sabah to the halls of Putrajaya and currently in the corporate corridors of Qualitas, Malaysia. And the opportunities that I've had is to travel abroad, to understand business of medicine, as well as regulatory, as well as marketing, operations, etc. And today I sit as the Chief Medical Officer of Qualitas Health Malaysia, as well as doing an operational role as the country head of operations in Bangladesh. Alongside with that, I manage all the other kind of issues that a company has. And yes, I'm very thankful for the opportunity to be here with you today, Selina.
Okay, so Ramon, whose idea was it to do medicine?
Believe it or not, it was mine. I was not your distinction student, which most doctors are supposed to be. My dad was. My dad, in fact, was a distinction and a high scholarship student, and he's a doctor. He's a general practitioner. He actually discouraged me to do medicine. He said it's a tough call. It's a tough course. But if you really want to be one, go and be one. So I wanted to do medicine. I mean, having a doctor in the house and my father as a practitioner, I think one of the key attributes was he was able to make a difference. And being able to make a difference, not just on the health side, as a doctor, people confide in you in many areas. You build up relationships and you're able to provide support, comfort, empathy, alongside being their carer. So that I think triggered me most. And I think that was always my passion to be able to make a difference in other people. And I enjoyed that aspect of it. Hence my persistence. It wasn't an easy journey, but a persistence to graduate and to accomplish whatever I've had done so far.
Okay, so Ramon, you're actually a Klang Valley boy, but you were a medical officer. You started working in rural Sabah. A lot of doctors would never want to go to Sabah. If they are from Klang Valley, they'll always try not to get to Sabah. So what was your experience like? Did you intentionally choose Sabah or you had no choice?
The choice was all mine. Back in then, many years ago, I think it was a matter of where you wanted to go, they will place you. In fact, JP interviewed us even before our final year med school, before our final MBBS. That was the slight difference that we had in terms of job opportunities. So yes, I chose Kota Kinabalu Sabah. It was my first choice, followed by Kuching, and third was Penang. So the reason why I chose Sabah was, I think it's part of being who I am. I enjoy new experiences. I wanted to travel. I enjoy traveling. And though I grew up in PJ in Bangsa in my early years, I have always liked I have always appreciated nature actually, hiking and stuff like that. And so Sabah was a good call for me. And plus, I had a few good friends who were already there who gave me a glowing report on the experience of working as a doctor in Sabah. So I think that formed my decision to choose to go to Sabah.
What was the experience like when you finally got there?
Was challenging. It was challenging. I had no car. I had to find my own accommodation, which was just a small room, sharing bathrooms in a motel across the hospital. The hospital itself, the infrastructure wasn't great. It's nothing like what it is today. It was tough. It was a tough, challenging journey. But as I said, in medicine, it's the patients and your actual work process that makes the difference. It was a very rewarding experience because we had the opportunity to see a lot of patients and you're able to make a difference in every patient. So at the end of the day, no matter how tiring it was, we worked close to what? When I say I only had 6 hours off, so 18 hours a day was our work, 6 a.m. to 12 midnight for the first 2 weeks was our tagging shift, right? 6 a.m. to 12 midnight. And but you left with a sense of achievement, left with a sense of satisfaction. And I think that's what drove me on. Doing my housemanship, yes. Now, housemanship is tough, it's tough, especially when you're going to deal with a lot of work and a lot of things is piled onto you. But you keep striving, and I think that builds character as well. Decision-making process when the medical officers and specialists actually depend on you. So that sense of satisfaction, that sense of pride, I think is what spurred me on.
And then you managed to become the deputy director of Hospital Tambunan. How did that happen?
Well, first it was me being sent to Tambunan, which that was not a choice. That was not a choice. So on completion of housemanship, I did not have any floating MO, nothing like that. The very next day, I was transferred to Hospital Tambunan, which is located about 100 kilometers from KK in the hill stations of Sabah. If you know Kota Kinabalu, Ranau, it is the town before that. There's 2 towns before that. So it's in the hill stations up in the mountains, but nothing, absolutely nothing, right? So going to Tambunan itself was further culture change because it was just paddy fields, very, very rural folk with very limited access. There was no 3G access. We had SMS. There's no WhatsApp then, at least in Tambunan. So I stayed on for a while, but I think the most important for me was adapting. You have to adapt. You got to adapt. So I learned the local language, the Dusun language, Kadazan Dusun. And being in a district hospital, it wasn't a big hospital. We only had about 70 beds, but it was a full-fledged hospital. We had an OT, operating theater. We had an emergency, accident and emergency. We had outpatient. We had a dialysis center. So we had everything. We had everything a hospital has, but of course on a smaller scale. The difference is that you are dependent on. You are the only doctor. When you're on call, you're the only doctor for the whole town. And when you do weekend calls, you're on call from Friday evening right up to Monday morning. Nobody is around. You are the only doctor. And so patients depend on you. There's this trust. There's this 150% trust they place on you. Right. And so I think it grew on me. And so as much as I enjoyed the clinical work, it was tough. It was tough. I must say there was only 4 MOs. And we had to cover all these 3 wards, OT, emergency, outpatients, every day 100 patients in each clinic. So it was tough. But while tough, the tough get, as you say, what doesn't break you makes you stronger. So how I became the deputy director was not, I would say not by accident, but I think it was just my longevity in the district. At that time, there were a lot of doctors coming from Peninsula, and the earliest chance they could leave, they applied to leave. But I enjoyed being a jack of all trades. As I mentioned to you in the earlier days, Selina, I had to do cesarean sections on my first day on call. First day on call as a MO, I had to do a cesarean section, skin to skin, by myself. right? And then you got to do appendicectomies, you got to do CMR, you got to strep patients with ST elevation, and it's all you, right? You with the nurses. So yeah, as much as it's daunting, I think I guess God was on my side, and a lot of prayers went up in the emergency room, especially the labor room, having to do vacuum deliveries. So the decision process, I think, making able to prioritize and make decisions, I think, is where my growth happened most. And how I became the deputy director, I think, by staying on and seniority wise. And also, I think, as I said from the beginning, my intention was always to make a difference. Besides being a clinical doctor, I always looked at areas of how to improve the delivery of care. So, how we could manage the driver's roster, for example, how we could manage our budget better, how we could get our doctors' payments done better. So, I used to always voice these things out. So, finally, my director said, very good, since you like all this, why don't you come on and take on this role? And so, he gave me a few administrative roles, looking at procurement, for example, um, taking responsibility for certain small renovations in the hospital, certain planning of the new ward, etc. So those are the kind of things I think I got interested in because end outcome was there was better healthcare delivery. So I think that kind of set my path into the administration, and so that took me on to enjoy. So I still didn't give up my clinical work, Selina, because there's still more, right? So I have to look after the morning round starts with accident emergency, running to the ward, going to the labor room, assessing all the pregnant mothers, and then going back to the ward and see outpatient clinic and seeing 100 patients all by 1 p.m. So you got to do all that by 1 p.m. And then in the afternoon, when things are quieter in the outpatient clinic, I get to do my administrative duties. So attending to meetings, handling, chairing meetings, handling budgets, etc. And yeah, so that was juggling between the two, and then doing on call again and doing passive calls. So it was very exciting. I would say it was very exciting for me because I was able to utilize all facets of my abilities, and yep, it was great. So I think maybe because of that, I was offered and I took up the deputy director. Though they didn't give me an extra allowance because the small hospital doesn't have a budget for that allowance, but I took it on as something that I could learn from.
So, would you say that being in the rural area actually gave you a lot more opportunities to explore into doing things differently, doing other things beyond just your scope?
Definitely, most definitely, because it gave me exposure. I think in the end of the day, it's all about exposure. If you limit yourself to one area, you will never experience what's it like. So I think also being in a position where I did not have much of a choice, I would say, because in that position, being in the rural Sabah, I had to do a cesarean section for a patient who was, or 6 centimeters, not favorable CTG. I had to make the call. I have to call the specialist. They say, okay, go ahead and operate. So there was no option. There was no option for me. Like, can I wait for a specialist to come? No, there isn't that option. There isn't that option. I had to jump into it. I had to do it. I had to strap a patient. You got to do these things. There's no much option, but the exposure gave me a lot more. The learning curve was very steep. And thank God I did not falter anywhere. Of course, we did lose some patients. Accidents were quite abundant. There were a lot of accidents happening because simply due to poor infrastructure, not street lights. You'll find cases of people uh, ramming into house and floors, having their lungs pierced by the horn of a Kerbau, you know what I mean? And you're having to do a flap. I've never done one before, and then you're calling up your specialist in KK, how do I do this? And it's over the phone, you're having to do it. But, you save lives. You do a chest tube, you do intubation, you do things like that. And the reward is great when, you save someone's life, and it's amazing.
So, you were involved in Ops Dalat?
Oh, yes, 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 yes. They came out of the movie recently. If you know what I mean, Datu. Recently, there was a movie shown in the cinemas. Yeah, Ops Datu, Ops Daulat. Ops Daulat happened in 2012, if I'm not mistaken. 13, 2013. Yeah, we just celebrated 11 years. So this happened in Datu. Basically, there was some incursion by some pirates from Philippines, and they were occupying a certain part of Pelda Sahabat 18, which is a oil palm plantation it became a national crisis. And that was my first experience of what emergency felt like, what quarantine felt like way before the pandemic, where they actually quarantined a large tract of this space. And they had a small clinical theater in there, which was like a small longhouse made of wood. And due to the quarantine, that had to be immediately transformed into a hospital because no patients could leave that quarantine area. That was the risk, right? So all the boundaries were painted with red paint on the trees, on the roads, etc. So the people of there was a whole community of people, basically people of Pelda Sabah, in that area, which could not leave that area. So that clinical theater had to be overnight transformed into a hospital, which means ventilators, infusion pumps, huge. So that involved, so I volunteered. So JKN Sabah sent out a notice asking for doctors to volunteer to be on site, right, ground zero, to provide this care. And I was the first to volunteer myself and said, yes, I would like to go, much to my mom and my dad's disappointment, because they were saying, it's already bad enough you have to go all the way to Sabah. And now, in a crisis like this, why do you have to go? I said, well, for me, it was all about experience. I said in the beginning, when else will I get such an experience? And there's nothing unsafe about it because, as we all know, in any war or in any space, the hospitals are the most safeguarded place. We were armed with army and police and helicopters, doing medivacs, being escorted by police and ambulance. It was amazing. The experience was fantastic. So yeah, I was there for about 2 weeks. We slept in sleeping bags. We took turns, 2 doctors and 3, 4 staff. We took turns. We stayed. We showered in small bathrooms, really, really bad ones. But yeah, we were there for 2 weeks. And at the tail end of it, yeah, thank God everything went well. Went well in a sense. They were all killed in the end, and I was called to go and actually open those bags and body bags and see those maggot-invested bodies of those pirates that were killed. Yeah, it was a really eye-opening experience. I was exposed to post-trauma stress disorder first time, PTSD, talking to soldiers who went through sheer trauma, having to, I mean, we can elaborate more on those stories, but it was exciting stories, dealing with pirates, black magic, and whatever not. And just understanding the stress the army officer actually goes through. It also gave me the opportunity to see how actually very well equipped our armies are with the machineries that they have. Yep, and that was the opening gate for me to meet our then Minister, Datu Sri Dr. Sudran, our former DG, Tan Sri Hisham, and the then Deputy G, the late Dr. Jendran. So that, of course, it eventually led to my next journey in my career. If I were to explore that now, if I should elaborate on that, that was exciting. And at that time, that gave me my first experience of networking. Networking to the higher echelons of Ministry of Health.
During an incursion.
Actually, it was after the incursion, they come always after everything is done. And we met and we engaged and we went for a function where we were all honored with a medal. And and that's when I got my first experience meeting Datu Sri, that time Hisham, and the late Dr. Jendran. Yeah, and a year later, of course, it came into fruition when I was transferred back to Punjab.
So for those of you who don't know what Ops Daulat is, it's a 2013 Lahat Datu standoff. It was a military conflict in Lahat Datu, Malaysia, and it ended with the standoff ended with 72 people left dead, including 56 militant, 10 Malaysian security force personnel, and 6 civilian. The surviving militants were all captured or escaped. So, Ramon, did you suffer any PTSD from this?
Well, someone said I did, so hence I got 2 weeks off from work. But I don't think I did. I don't think I had any post-trauma because for me it was all exciting because I was still safe. But for me, it was just eye-opening. I was just completely blown away by the entire experience, seeing those 16mm bullets, those shells, hundreds of those shells on the ground. They actually could level down acres and acres of trees. They could actually saw down trees. Just that whole experience for me was entirely exciting. Being in a helicopter, medevac, adrenaline junkie, I think I am. I was, at least with my younger days. But yeah, it was good. There was some form of trauma, I think, in a sense that now that you just read back all that 72 dead bodies, yeah, memories of that, opening those dead bodies, stench, maggots. Yeah, but I think as being a doctor, I never took that as a bad thing. I always kind of, it was part and parcel of the job.
Could you hear the shootings
Oh,
from inside the clinic?
we were 1 kilometer away from actual ground zero, which is not very far. The clinic Kesihatan. So what happened was the siren was when they decided to attack, and so the two fighter jets came from KK, and so they sound the siren for 15 minutes, and then the fighter jets came in and bombed the place. So it was like watching a Middle East war on TV, but just live. Just, and we could hear the ground was shaking and the shooting was going on. And yeah, it was very audible, very audible.
Was there any point you thought that maybe this is the end for me?
Well, I think in the beginning itself, when I volunteered for it, that thought did cross my mind. But at that time, not being married and coming out and doing that, I think there was not much. I did have that thought, but again, I said, hey, if it has to happen, it has to happen. But let's go. You won't know till you go. So yeah, I guess I didn't give too much of thought to it, but it did cross my mind.
And you turned a wooden longhouse into a mini hospital in a couple of days.
Yeah, well, that's not just me. I can't just say it was me. It was just the whole JK and Sabah. So a lot of funds were given, and so a lot of procurement. So it gave me insight into procurement, into emergency funds. So there was no negotiation. It was just procuring. And of course, all the things that come with that, the politics and everything else that comes with such a impact. So yeah, we had to basically know how Clinic Kesihatan is, right? So it's very limited what they have. And this is rural Sabah, really rural. Tamaran wasn't rural compared to this, right? Tamaran wasn't. This is really rural. This is a small, like a longhouse, wooden longhouse in the middle of an estate. And so we had to buy equipment, medications, antibiotics, the works. We had to have dopamine, norepinephrine. We had to have, all those kind of inotropes. We had to have infusion pumps, each infusion pump costing $30,000, $40,000. So all those kind of things in a makeshift place we had to cater to. And so we did. We could as much as we could. Of course, we couldn't perform surgeries and stuff, but we didn't have those kind of cases. So, yeah, I think we had one guy who had pneumonia and he had to be airlifted, medevac, and he was quite bad as an old gentleman. I think we had a bad wound, a dislocation or a fracture, which we couldn't. We didn't have an X-ray. That too had to be sent to Datu hospital. So it wasn't many, but there were cases which we could treat and do with the modalities provided. The nurses were brilliant. The support that we had from JK and Sabah was great. They looked after us well. But I think, that's a call of duty, right? It felt a sense of pride. There's a call of duty and you're able to do that. And I think that's the calling for every doctor when we sign up to be a doctor with the government. It's a call of duty. So that as I said, it was the pride and the satisfaction and the energy that I got from it that just kept me going.
Okay, so tell us after Sabah, what happened next?
Sabah, as I said, I never wanted to leave Sabah. I loved it. I climbed the mountain 4 times. I got my diving license in Zipadan. I went diving across many islands. I used the opportunity from South KK to travel. I traveled quite extensively throughout Southeast Asia during that time, diving mostly, going for diving escapades. So Sabah is a beautiful state. They have the flora and fauna if you like outdoors. And so from there, I also realized that I'd come to a point where I was the king of the castle, where I had come to the point that I was the point of reference at 23 years of age. I was the point of reference for all the people of Tabunan, right? And then I realized that as much as I enjoyed it, I loved it. I mean, I had saved a lot of money because you don't spend much money in districts like that. So you're able to, with a mixture between locum and intra-locum and your salary. I mean, relatively at that time, I would say that it was good. It was a good, healthy sum. So there was absolutely no reason to leave. The then Deputy Chief Minister, Datu Sri Pairin Kittingan, was my patient. He lived in Tamudan. He was a good friend of mine. So everybody knew you. You were treated like a small-time VIP. I was invited to be in the district council. So, but after a while, you begin to realize that there must be more to life. There's more that you can contribute. And so I used to travel back, as you come back to KL every 2 months or so. And I realized that as much as I loved it in Sabah, there was no more space for me to expand, because I must say at an early onset, I decided that I wasn't going to specialize. Right, I have to put out there, because I think doctors today, they believe that the next step is doing the masters, doing the specialist, and moving. Well, I chose the road that I'm not going to specialize. I did not even attempt it. I think I did one pass test. I think that's about it. I think I did one pass test, an attempt to do MRCP. I wanted to be a dermatologist, but life happens, and I think I embraced it, and I realized where my strengths were and what are my weaknesses, and so I embraced it and said, okay, maybe it's time for me to move back to KL. I think also circumstances, because I think two of my siblings who are not in Malaysia were getting married at home in KL, and my elderly parents were of need of me. I think so. Circumstances, coincidences all come together and helps you make a decision. And so that is when I picked up the call and called my now new friends in MOH, which happens to be the deputy DG and the DG. And, at that time they will say, anything you need, just give us a call. Right? So at that time I said, sure. So I used it. 1 year later, 2014, I sent a message to Putrajaya saying, I would like to be transferred. Can you help me with a transfer to one of the hospitals in KL? The answer that I got was, Raymond, if you only come here for a short period of time, let me advise you not to go to a clinical hospital, because your clinical experience in Sabah has been amazing, right? So coming to a hospital in KL will be quite different, and you might be disillusioned by the different environment, the expectation, the everything else that comes with being in a city hospital, right? I don't want to mention what exactly in details are they, but I think it's quite well known, the toxicity, the politics, everything else that comes with being in a big hospital. So they said, why don't you just come to Putrajaya, since you have got admin background? Why don't you come to Putrajaya and help us out in Ministry of Health? And from there, it's easier. If you wanted to go back, it's easier for me to transfer you out. So that was it. And I said, okay, let me think about it. And I remember this was the 30th of March, 2014. And on the 3rd of April, I got a letter saying I'm transferred to Putrajaya, dated 1st of April. And yeah, so that was it. So it was just a sudden decision. It was just a consideration. And it was something that I just had to adapt to immediately. And it was very sad because I had not fully decided I wanted to leave. Right. So again, that taught me that sometimes life happens and you just got to go with it. Right. But I thought I was going only for 6 months. I thought I was only going for 6 months. And after the wedding's over, after my dad is feeling better, I can come back. And so that was my thought. In fact, I did not sell any of my stuff. I had a motorbike and a car. I left it all behind and I just moved. I said, I'll be back in 6 months. I told my staff, you can use my house and use whatever is there. It's fine. Go ahead. And I'll be back in 6 months. But yeah, life happens again. I was transferred in April 2014 and I was positioned in CCAPS, Cawangan Kawalan Amalan Perubatan Swasta. At that time, it wasn't a very famous division. Most people, now it's very common. Everyone knows CCAPS. Everybody knows CCAPS. In the last 10 years, a lot of doctors have moved into the private sector. They've understood CCAPS. It got a lot more publicity. Back then, it wasn't a very popular place to be. I don't think it still is, but anyway, it was a space that I was placed in. And yeah, I met my Timbalan Tungara. It was a momentous change. It was huge. In fact, it was more difficult coming back to KL than going to Sabah.
What was the difficulty?
Because, as I mentioned, Selina, I've always been a clinical oriented, seeing patients, very clinically oriented. Having moved to Putrajaya, it was purely admin. From 8:30 to 5:30, purely admin, looking at a computer screen, attending meetings in boardrooms. It was tough. It was very, very tough. In terms of cost of living went up, increased tremendously. I had to live with my parents. 15 years I lived away from parents, from the day of med school right up to that point. 15 years away from parents, and now you're back in their house under their loving care was tough. After being an individual bachelor and living along to your terms, now you're back to son, have you eaten? What time you coming home? Where are you going? Etc. etc. So it was very, very stressful. And I realized that because I'd been away from KL for so long, I'd lost a lot of friends. I mean, a lot of friends and acquaintance. My networking with friends was all detached. So I lost contact with school friends. Social media was not what it is today. I mean, there was some Facebook, and it wasn't what it is today. So it was tough. The transition back, especially driving to Putrajaya, attending office, sitting in front of a desk, pushing paper, writing letters, stuff. It was very tough. Very, very tough. But again, life happens, and I would say, if you allow me to proceed onto this phase of my life, it was tough. But 3 months later, I met my now wife at my brother's wedding. The first of the two weddings that I came back to help organize. I met my now wife at the wedding, at my brother's wedding. And 10 months later, we got married. 11 months later, we got married. 2015, I was married. So that itself, I was not able to go back to Sabah, right? But actually what happened was I was an unhappy person. I was unhappy for the first year in CCAPS. It was not happy. I was not couldn't do something that I enjoyed. At the end of the day, no, yeah, you were in the minister's office, you had a lot of exposure going, but till you settle it within your heart, you are just an uncomfortable person. It is not good. So I think pretty much what you went through when you decided to transition. Though you think that this is good for you, but if it's not at peace with yourself, you're never going to be happy. So one particular moment, I think I shared with this before, I was so close to putting my transfer back to Islam. Even told my wife, and she said, well, if that's what you really want, okay, I can get a job in a pharmacy. KK, not a problem. I said, but I don't want to go to KK. I want to go back to Bangladesh.
Like where you were king.
Pardon? Yeah.
Where you were king of the castle.
Yeah, you're king of the castle, man. Everyone's saying, bila mau balik, bila mau, ni, bila nak balik. So I was like, now, but you're married now. Your wife, wife. This is what I mean when I tell younger doctors life happens. And it's collective responsibility. So I can't say, no, go back government, you follow me, and you just work in the sundry shop there because there's no pharmacy per se, right? I can't do that, So life happens and collective decisions have got to be made. And so then I thought about it, what if I go to kill are still better. So I was still a very disturbed mind at that period. That period, getting married, not happy at your job, living expensive, all the obligations of being a married couple, all those things of financial planning grew on me. And it was tough. It was a tough time. I wasn't enjoying my work because you were not interested in. You're placed in a position you're not interested. The Lima Lapan and 586, laws the last thing on my mind. But now you got to understand these regulations, you got to write letters that you have to be perfect, you got to make sure it's go through proofread so many times, stuff. But one instance, as I said, I believe in a God and God makes things possible. So there was just one very chance incident that I was walking out of my office and I bumped into my old head of medicine from Sabah, Dr. Kanan. And he set me straight and said, Raymond, stop thinking about Sabah. This is where you have to be. You are where you have to be. Don't look back. When you read a book, you read it forwards. You don't turn the chapters back. You don't read the previous chapters. You move forwards. That is a chapter that is closed. You are now married. You are now here in Putrajaya. This is where things happen. Focus on what you have to do. Learn it and be the best at it and move on from here. That was an enlightening moment for me. It was October 15, 2015. Right?
And what happened after that? After that encounter, how did that change things for you? Where you're working, where you were in Putrajaya as CCAPS, how did things change?
Moment that came to me, I realized, yes. So I stopped all thoughts of going back to Sabah. And I said, I'm going to stay here and make the best out of this. Right? And that's when I began to consider my options. So that is when I began to learn and understand the regulations. and became more articulate about it. I was able to provide better advice. I was able to provide better service to all the private specialist service centers that came to CCAPs. So one of my talents is being able to express myself and communicate. And so I became like the communicator for the department. And most people shied away from meeting the private sector. I was very keen on engaging them. So I will go out, explain to them the regulations. See, most in private sector, nobody wants to do wrong. Nobody wants to treat the system because it's money involved, right? But the biggest problem is many people are just ignorant. Like me, I was ignorant of the regulations and laws. Like most doctors are, we don't study law. So I used this opportunity to understand it, explain to them why the door has to be 1.2, why the ceiling has to be 2.4, why do you need the room space to this big, why you need to have a sink position this way. So when you give meaning to the regulation, the adoption is much higher. So I managed to gain a lot of traction with private sector by engaging them and explaining, empathizing with their ignorance, understanding their problems, and explaining it and giving them meaning to what they're doing. And they will comply. And hence, I guess I got a bit popular in a sense because everybody then said, call Dr. Raymond in CCAPS, he'll explain to you. So my number in CCAPS, my 8827121, I think, was constantly buzzing. And I was always, because for me, I think one of my late mentor, Dr. Jadran, actually said, facilitate, don't frustrate. Then that was his mantra to us. As a regulatory body, facilitate, don't frustrate. And that impacted me quite a bit because we are in a position to facilitate, because we are the regulatory people, we are providing help. So when we facilitate, we're not helping, we're facilitating. It's very different. Helping is like, bending rules and stuff. But when you are facilitating, you're facilitating them in the right direction. And that made a big impact. He always reminded us of that. And I took that on and I used to facilitate as much as possible. So I guess that kind of helped. So from 2015 to end of 2016, it was an exponential year for me in terms of networking, in terms of embracing what I had, understood the knowledge, used it to my advantage, and just sending out positive vibes. Where everyone looked at it as a very negative space because regulatory and enforcement, nobody liked it, right? So I decided to create positive vibes in that space. And I think in turn, within the year, by end of 2016, I was getting a lot of friends in the private sector who said, hey, why don't you come and join us and, prevent us from making such mistakes or helping us? Because it's all money, right? Everything faster is efficient. Everything's efficient is cost saving. And cost saving is good for business, right? And so they realized this. And suddenly I realized I was getting a lot of interest from hospitals alike, from, Qualitas, individual operators. There's one guy who flew me to Sydney on business class just to see the operations in Sydney. They were operating two centers, one in here in PJ, another one in Sydney. And I was like blown away by the opportunity. I was like, I cannot take your job. I can't. I'm still with the government. No, don't worry. We just want you to see. Just come for a holiday. So it gave me a taste of what the private sector is like. So I said, no favors. I did not do any favors. There were a lot of opportunities. People wanted to, offer you favors, bribes, etc. But, in the end of the day, someone said, you bend once, you'll be bending for the rest of your life. So you can't take that risk. So that's another thing that I stuck with, even from my early days in Sabah, is that you cannot afford to, as a doctor, you cannot afford to in any way to make shortcuts, or whether for self-gain or any gain, you can't afford that. And one of my team partner at that time, Dr. Afida, was very clear on these things. We couldn't even receive fruit baskets. So in Christmas, I'll get a lot of Christian, celebrating Christmas in the office. I'll get a lot of hampers from all these people who are just saying thanks. Right? That's what they do. The private sector, that's what they do. And I couldn't receive even one of them. I had to turn them all away. It was just not the right policy.
So it sounds like the moment you stopped fighting, moving forward, a lot more opportunities came to you.
Positive, becoming a positive mindset. You may not always be positioned in a positive environment, but it's your positive mindset that will navigate you through that negative space, right? And to look at things better, looking for the silver lining in a dark cloud. But if you do not change your mindset and you remain in a negative mindset, it's going to be dark days every day.
Okay, just before we continue, I want to share with our listeners that if you're a doctor considering a career shift but don't know where to start, Disruptive Doctors offers a non-clinical Pathfinder workshop, which is designed to help doctors like you explore new possibilities beyond clinical practice. Now, Raymond, you mentioned you started to get a lot of offers. You were even flew on business class to Australia where you were wooed. You're facing this crossroads with so many job offers, Qualitas versus everyone else. So what was your thought process and how did you end up in Qualitas?
Yeah, so I think for me it was a matter of course I was overwhelmed. That's quite overwhelmed. Being a government servant, all these things are pretty overwhelming. You don't get these opportunities, and you generally feel you're nobody and you're just doing a job, etc. Like how everyone else feels in the government service. We're just a spoke in the wheel. But to make the decision where to leave, in fact, my father was not too keen on me leaving the government service. Being a traditional Indian man, doctor, he always felt that, be security, job security, stay in the government. It's the best thing to do. When the opportunities came, as I said, there were multiple. I won't say so many. Let me not be over zealous about it. Let's just say there were a couple. And they were good. There were reputable hospitals, chains. There was individual group clinics. And of course, there was Qualitas. Again, as I believe life is a matter of coincidences. And, I believe in God and I believe things happen for a reason. So it so happened that in my office, one of the cases on the table was a Qualitas clinic. Right? It was a Qualitas clinic where the case was going back and forth for a long time. And my colleague was managing that was absent, right? And she was away from maternity leave. And I took her file on and I said, I'll handle this case. And when I went through it, it was just going back and forth, just about a door. Just about one door, the positioning of a door. It was just ridiculous. The red tape, letter, the number of letters that are going back and forth, all because of a door. So I just said to my boss, let's just go and visit. Let's go and visit, make sure that it's what it is. Because back then it was Putrajaya instructing the state has to go and visit, come back, write a report to the Putrajaya make a decision, write back a letter to them. So it's just going back and forth. And I hate writing letters, right? It's just annoying, the formal letters. So I just said, let me go visit. It was never done before. It was never done before that people from CCAPs at that time, we had no vehicle, we had no car, government car to go and visit. I never
Did
forget.
you pioneer that, the visit?
I would like to say I did. I don't want to take claim to it, but I was the first one to volunteer to go for a visit. And my boss said, how will you go? I said, with my car. And they said, you can't claim because there's no policy for claiming for transport in the government because you take the government cars. So I said, it's okay. I don't need to claim. I think I just want to solve this problem out. And they said, why you want to go alone? Is there something for you? I said, no, anyone can come. I said, bring to everyone. And I said, there's no issue. I just want to settle this problem, But that's where I think the big difference between the government and the private sector is. And that's when I think we're beginning to realize that efficiency is so important how we communicate. So, long story short, I went to visit this Qualitas clinic. I saw it, we settled the problem in 5 minutes. I told them what needs to be done. And being a private sector, they sorted it out that same afternoon. By the time I got back to the office, they already set proof of what I had been doing. It's been sorted. So, in that engagement at the clinic, my now retired boss, Cyrus Tumor, was there, the director. He said, hey, you're a good guy to have. Why don't you, come and prevent us from these problems again? So that's when, coming back to your answer, why I choose Qualitas is simply because I was just an MBBS doctor. I had no specialist, I had no MBA. So all the other options were more lucrative. But I think that's a decision process I made where I needed to be relevant. So running after money, though it's exciting, though it was tempting, but for me, it was more being relevant. I think coming back to my own ethos of making a difference, right? Being able to make a difference, I felt that I won't be able to contribute much at that time, coming out from the government service, going into a specialist hospital with the minimal experience I had, I thought I'll be chewed up alive. Right? This was 10 years ago. Now 8 years ago. I'll be chewed up alive by the specialists and stuff. What did I do to gain their respect? Or if I went to a smaller center who was offering me a lot more money, but the security is not there because it's just two-man company. And what if they decide to part ways? What happens to me? Right? Here I am coming from MOH, it's pretty reputable. So I said, if I'm going to the private sector, let me go to somewhat an organization that is equally large and respectable, and something where I will be able to earn my respect as well. So it wasn't about the money, but more of the opportunity to make a difference. And that's when I took Qualitas instead. And I joined Qualitas in the medical services department as a manager. So that was January 2017.
So when you moved from clinical to non-clinical, that was a big shift. There was clearly a lot of challenges. So from public sector to the private healthcare sector, so what were the challenges here?
Huge, again, very big. Because as doctors, if you know, our BBS stands for Mass Bachelor of Medicine, Bachelor of Surgery. But once you come to the private sector, and you're in the corporate office, and not in the clinic, and in the office, marketing, business, sales is not part of MBBS. So you got to adapt and you got to learn. I thought I was coming for regulatory because that was my background, right? So I thought I was going to come and do regulatory and compliance, only to find out that it was 10% of my job scope. And 90% of it was managing doctors. I had 100 over doctors to manage, their contracts, engaging with doctors. Basically, like I mentioned at last year's forum, being the go-between the corporate and the clinician. They're both birds, but they I am anything, speaking the different language, being that person. It was tough because looking at P&Ls, for example, understanding what a P&L is, what is EBITDA, what is PBT, what is TAC, what is fixed cost, what is cost of sale, percentage, what is revenue, and all gross revenue, gross profit, percentages. This was a steep learning curve, right? And I had to be part of it. I could choose to sink or swim, So I have got colleagues of mine who come in here, and then they choose to, no, but this is what I came for, and I only want to do this. So today they're still here doing that, right? But for those who are willing to embrace everything else in the sector, because private sector does not have the luxury of employing 50 people to do 5 jobs. You get what I mean? You employ 5 people to do 50 jobs. You want to look at cost efficiency. You want to look at multitasking. You need people to, it's all about efficiency. It's all about how do you manage your finances. So yeah, for me it was tough, but I embraced it. I engaged in my mentors who were brilliant. Dr. Nurul Amin is the one who actually was the prime mover in me joining alongside with the now retired Dr. R.S. Kumar, the founder. They're just learning from them. Every day was a learning curve. Just watching them, how they conducted meetings, their body language, the choice of words. Every day was a learning experience. It wasn't just learning on the job, but it was learning from individuals, from mentors, on how they, simple things like taking out a business card and how do you give your business card? You get what I mean? It's small things. It's small things that make it who you are, who you become, how you dress. Like Qualitas is still pretty old school. We still full sleeve with tie and collar. We don't have t-shirts and stuff like that. But how do we adapt to the changes? So it is stuff like that that actually excited me, and I embraced it. And within a year, we had a bit of restructuring. So I moved up to head of medical services for Malaysia. That was in 2018. And then later, upon the retirement of Dr. Kumar in 21, I became the chief medical officer for the group. So that has been my transition in Qualitas. It's been very exciting. I mean, the opportunities presented, because healthcare is for all. The difference about our industry is everybody needs healthcare, especially during the pandemic. And I was the first doctor to start COVID screening, private screening for COVID for patients, right? Because if you remember 2020, January, February, March, you only have to come from China, Taiwan, had flu or fever for 3 days, etc., etc. Only then you could go to a government facility and get tested. But once it started getting spread out, people were getting worried. So seeing an opportunity and acting on it. Not just an opportunity for business, but an opportunity to cater to people, making the difference. So that's when we launched. And I was on March 18th was our lockdown. In March 6th, I started seeing patients outside. Then DG, that was Isham, was the one. We had a press conference and we were the only healthcare providers to do private testing. So that was what I engaged in. So like that, Qualitas has always been the front leader in many changes. In many changes where delivery of healthcare is provided. We were the first organized 100% equity group. Today we have many. Today we have many other groups that have followed suit. And their modus operandi is almost similar. It works well. 27 years in the business, all years positive. Never one year have you been in the red. It has always been a productive, positive company led by our chairman. So there's a lot to learn. There's a lot to learn. As I said, MBBS does not teach you how to do these things. In fact, MBBS doesn't even teach you how to use Excel, let alone manipulate it, right? Using terms like pivoting and etc. and doing graphs. And it's not what you learn in school. But, the necessity is the mother of all invention, right? So as while you're here, you just roll with it. Like I did in Sabah, like I did in Putrajaya. I was now placed in a new environment that I got to roll with. And by being in that position, I was given exposure to do health talks. I started doing a lot of health talks with corporates, engaging with patients. So my personal was always there. I could be a doctor as well as I could be a manager. So I could have, just like I was in Tambunan, being a clinician and being an admin, just in a different scale. And then the opportunity came to travel, to go to countries where we see opportunities. We run business in Australia, Singapore, Malaysia, and recently Bangladesh. So they give me the opportunity to run operations in a different country. Very exciting, meeting new people, understanding the culture, understanding the way of life. Vietnam, Indonesia, a lot of opportunities to travel. So that actually fulfilled my first sentence where I told you why I went to Sabah was because I wanted to travel. Right? I just like the idea of traveling and going to some new places. So today I've come a full circle. Well, I believe there's more circles to come. I like to think I'm young. But so it has been a great, fruitful journey. Transitioning is not easy. It's all in the mindset.
How do you think your current role, how do you think you are impacting healthcare differently?
Well, as I said, okay, just as an example, I mentioned to you during the COVID pandemic, making that decision to offer these services, going to the ministry, giving them a proposal, and being able to implement it, changed so much. I was the first doctor to get the first imported COVID positive case. It was a girl coming from US. She had just flown in from US. She was one of a doctor's kids. She had just flown in from US, and she was the first positive imported case, and it was reported. And that's when led to doing the COVID testing at the airports. We sent a proposal to do COVID testing at the entry. So small things that you don't realize that you do can actually impact because healthcare is for all. So I've realized that there are many things that we have done as a company that is paving the way forward for many others to follow suit. So that was one clear example in how one opportunity led to another, and we could impact healthcare in a big way. We and Qualitas have an EMR, for example. We have invested technology where all our clinics are linked with one system. So it's massive because today the government hospitals are not linked. Your records are all over the place. But in Qualitas, your record stays with you. We've got a mobile app where you can book your appointment and it schedules into the clinic, any clinic across the country. So these are things that you can do because you're part of a larger organization that has the funding and the resources to motivate and guide your ideas. So yeah.
So what would your advice be for young doctors who are, okay, I think there are a few doctors here. A few types of groups of doctors. One would be, when they get sent to Sabah, a lot of them resign because that's not what I signed up for. There are doctors on the fence who are not sure, should I continue clinical, don't continue. And there are those that know that they want to leave and go into the private sector. What are your advice for these three groups of doctors?
Okay, so as I mentioned, the first one being sent to Sabah, I cannot say that Sabah is the same Sabah that I went to close to 18 years ago. Things are maybe different now, but things are still better now. My friends are now going there as specialists and gazetting specialists to Sabah, and they tell me it's brilliant, it's lovely. I mean, things have developed so much in Sabah, shopping malls, etc. So I would still say embrace the opportunity because life happens, and it's very important. Again, as I keep saying in all your forums, is like emulate the put under Tanis later, ask yourself, what is it that you want, But if you're really not that person, if you're going to be miserable and you're going to be upset about not being with your family members, you're not going to go to Star Hill or Pavilion, you're not going to have all these things, and it's going to hurt you terribly because as a person, you need this, right? Then yes, fine, but don't choose trivial reasons, right? They did not pay for my transfer of my car, because in the end of the day, this is the calling for you to be. There's a far bigger picture to realize. Don't look at the small things right now and make it a fundamental decision, right? There will be challenges. Life is about challenges. If there's no challenges, it's not life, right? So embrace those small things. See how you can adapt to it because the bigger picture is a lot more rewarding. It's a lot more rewarding when you have. Why I like Sabah so much, and I would say the same for Sarawak, is the people. The people, I think it's set all over the place. It's the people and the adoption and the respect. For a doctor, it's very, very important to be respected, to be appreciated for what you do, because that's where we get the energy from, and I think that's what they say, isi tersirap, for a doctor. To get the energy to do more, you need to have good patients who give you back the energy to give of your best. It's a cycle thing, right? The second question, what was it? So I would say embrace the opportunity. But again, if it's going to hurt you and make you miserable, then yes. But ask yourself, what are you really doing it for? Right? Why am I saying no? Be honest with yourself and make the decision. Because at the end of the day, no point regretting. Live life without regrets. So whatever decision you make sure you don't regret it later. That's it. What was the second question again, Selina?
The second one is those that are on the fence. Should I continue clinical or should I leave? What would your advice be for those guys?
Again, what was your calling to do medicine? Your first question to me. I did to do medicine. Why did you do medicine? I think that's very important. That's a very important question. Today I lecture in Taylor's University as well as an adjunct lecturer. I speak to the final year medical students. So I asked them, there's some students who today, even in final year med school, they say, no, actually, I don't want to practice medicine anymore. In final year medicine, they haven't even gone to housemanship. They're already telling me they don't want to. It's okay. It's okay, because the choice of doing medicine, today a degree, a lot of people choose not to go to degrees. They think they can be an entrepreneur outside the university field. But for me, I think a degree in medicine gives you, it really pushes you. If you remember your final year medicine, I think that today is one of the toughest times of my life. I think passing that final MBBS, if you just explain a question and you got to decipher and diagnose everything, there's a lot of brain power that's used. Your knowledge, your expertise, your experience, remembering the patient you saw, our patients, a long case, it's actually very, very long case in medicine. Hence, if someone can graduate from being a doctor in MBBS, that person is set apart differently, I think, right? Not to be biased towards doctors, not against anyone, but I think that ability to do a long case and come up with a clinical judgment, taking all information and coming up with a conclusion, that's an amazing skill, right? That's an amazing skill. So that skills can be used elsewhere. Do you want to do clinical medicine? As I said, I wanted to be a dermatologist, right? But life will happen along the way. You may not pass some exams. You may not get the opportunity, but nothing should stop you from going after your passion. I did not have a passion to become the chief medical officer. I did not have that ambition. I just had the passion to give my best wherever I was positioned. And along the way, I had to choose, okay, what's best for my career? I was already in admin. Now, what's best? Do I remain as a UD48, UD50 chronic MO in Putrajaya? Do I do that? Or do I use my talents and go elsewhere and on it elsewhere? So I think that decision again comes to the fact that you got to accept reality. Frustration is there. You know how to get the master's program. You may not pass your MRCP. You may not pass your exams. So what next? But do not go and do something just to achieve somebody else's dream. Do not say that person did it, so I can do it too. Not everybody is cut out to be a research and development officer in a pharmaceutical. Not everybody can go into sales. Not everybody can be an entrepreneur and start disruptive doctors. Not everyone can become a chief medical officer. It's not. It's your passion. So question yourself again, where does my passion lie? If it's clinician, then focus on being a clinician. You don't have to be a specialist to be a clinician. You can still be a consultant in many areas. You can be a psychologist, you can do so many other things. It is not all about being a specialist, right? And the third question is, don't you want to transition to a
Private healthcare management like you.
So I think there was a question posed during our session during the healthcare forum we had 2 months ago. There was a doctor who was in management in government side. I think the biggest difference is being efficient. The last time I mentioned cost. Cost is very important. The difference between government sector and private sector is managing the funds, right? Because in government sector, it's not your money, right? It's government's money, and the accountability is less. But in private sector, it is the company's money which pays your salary. So the heights of accountability is very much higher. The responsibility is very much higher. So how do you manage that and be efficient and to produce and to give back to the company that has employed you? And only then will you see your career progress, right? As I said earlier, also in the healthcare forum, you may do qualification. Go ahead, do a diploma in finance, do a diploma in HR, do a diploma in marketing, or do a degree, whichever. There's nothing wrong with studying, nothing wrong with doing an MBA. Please do that. But those are qualifications that will get you to the interview, right? But if this is your set, if this is what you want to do, like how I said in my experience, I didn't plan all this, but just doing the roster, for example, just doing some procurement work, learning, understanding some bit of invoicing and receipts and bills, understanding these processes led me into give me the opportunity to be a deputy director, which then will then become a senior director in government, which led me to this. It is all a learning curve. So if that is your passion, don't wait for something to happen, make it happen. Do it now.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Raymond. That was a very, very engaging conversation. So if you're enjoying our conversation and considering exploring new career path, remember to check out Disruptive Doctors Non-Clinical Pathfinder Workshop and also join us on our annual conference. It usually happens in August where like-minded doctors come together to share ideas and impact healthcare differently. That wraps up another episode of Postcall Beyond the White Coat. If you're a doctor ready to impact healthcare differently, join us at Disruptive Doctors. Until next time, I'm Dr. Selina. Keep disrupting the norm.
Thank you very much, Selina.
Join Disruptive Doctors. Oh, oh, Disruptive